Regenerative ranching is not an industry yet. It's on the cusp of a movement. People not in the sector always ask the question, well, why isn't everybody doing it? Well, why does everybody drive the same vehicle that their father did? You kind of get into, not a habit, but a lifestyle. And until someone shows you that spark on the outside, or one day you wake up and say, I don't know that my business is what it should be. It's just a big deal when you're asking a farmer and a rancher to take the risk of changing their operation to something brand new. So the challenges, the problems you're facing, we are planning to deliver you a solution. And it's not to tell you, it's to equip you. Steve Rhines, President and CEO. I've been in this position since 2019, but I started with Noble in March of 2001. We used to live in McKinney, Texas, and I would drive every morning to downtown Dallas and come back. My wife is an angel and a saint, but I had missed one too many pediatrician visits, and my mother-in-law lived in this town. And so she got online and said it may be time for a career change. And so she went to the Noble Foundation website and she scrolled through and she said, they need a safety manager. Can you even do that? And I said, I don't think I can. Not that safe to begin with. But two, we had invested quite a bit into a legal education. So maybe we needed something more focused on that. They had a technology transfer manager position that looked like I had written the job description. So interviewed here on December 1st of 2000, got an offer and started here on March 1st of 2001. And then it was the greatest position. It was the greatest president that I worked with. And he let me do more things than just be a lawyer. So you got to see the whole operation. And it's hard not to fall in love with this place. So you had researchers from, I don't know, 20 different countries. You were in the field, we had ranches, we had consultants that care about farmers and ranchers and always have. And then you had an evolution of the organization, and then it was always tethered back to the original founder, Lloyd Noble, who wanted us to better mankind through agriculture, was our mantra at the time. And so just allowed to progress through the organization, and in 2019 got the opportunity to be president. So it's one of those stories. Founded in 1945 by a philanthropist, oil man by the name of Lloyd Noble. He grew up in this part of the country. Even 1896, I believe, was when he was born. So he's here when it's Indian territory. He worked in his father's and uncle's. They shared a hardware store. This was a time in the early 1900s when cotton was king in this region. So agriculture was king. And so they were always working with farmers and ranchers. They understood that there was a different sort of mindset, a different work ethic associated with agriculture, which still exists today. But they knew how to take care of the land. And if they didn't, it wasn't necessarily their fault. They just didn't know. They were still even doing things then, just like Grandpa did, which doesn't make sense because it feels so long ago, but that's true. And so he got the experience of seeing this area, what agriculture meant to it. It was the cornerstone. But also what people did at the time is they took gambles. So they would charge their entire year's worth of expenses and then depend on a big payoff. Weather issues, bad management issues, cotton over and over and over without replacing anything in the soil resulted in booms and bust. He also had the Dust Bowl around 1930. And so he got to witness all this. Mr. Noble was a bit of a nomad. I've often said if he was my child, he would freak me out because he was trying to figure out what he wanted to do. He's going to OU. His mother wants him to be a lawyer. He gets up there, and this is about the time they hit one of the largest domestic finds of oil in our history of the nation, which was over in Healton, which is only about 25 miles north and west of here. And so the oil field called him. And he was more businessy. He wasn't so much the driller. He got a great driller as a friend and just got bit by the bug. And that brought us organizations like Noble Corporation. He brought us corporations like Noble Energy. And he became from Ardmore and later Tulsa, but locally Oklahoma, these far-flung drilling operations that went from the Gulf Coast to the Canadian border and left to right. And so he just took advantage of his curiosity and his quest, and he was great at it. What he began to see is his operations put him in an airplane over this part of the region, and what he saw is Oklahoma and Texas were flowing into the Red River, and it pained him. In some of his writings, we have such great writings. We were founded in 1945. He wrote a lot in 1943. So we got this great snapshot, and he spoke a lot. We'd have his transcripts from his speeches. 3 years before we were founded, 2 to 3 years before, 2 to 3 years after we were founded. So you got this great perspective. But he started the Samuel Roberts Noble Foundation, named for his father, not himself, which speaks to one, his humility, but he said that his father was the most generous man he had ever met. So he named this organization after him. He endowed it with stock. They immediately started giving grants. In 1946, the first grant was for a micron microscope for the University of Oklahoma. So he always had this affinity for technology, advancement, science, innovation. He had great relationships with universities. He understood that they're the bedrock of education. But at the same time, he starts an organization here that works with farmers and ranchers. And what you see from his writings, his speeches, is there's just a number of touchstones that I believe we still follow today. Farmers and ranchers are the foundation of the land and of change. You don't start at government and work down. You start with farmers and ranchers and you work up. The land is critical. We, at times, and it's as prevalent today as it was in 1945, sometimes we regard the land as a horizontal surface that holds up our animals or grows our plants, but there's a lot more to it. And this is a time in 45 where they don't understand biology, they understand chemistry. And so he spoke a lot about putting back in the soil what you take away. It would be interesting to see what he thinks about all the things we've learned in the last decade or so about biology. He saw it, he just didn't know the details. If the economics don't work and the farmer and rancher leaves, there's no management on the land. So they're just these truths that he pulled all the way through and put in this organization. What's really unique about the Noble Foundation, and that's where we started in 45, is its family was its board. And today we're in our fourth generation. It is made up of 15 individuals. 12 of them are direct descendants or spouses of the original founder. And you've got this family relationship back to where we started, which is great. We were the Samuel Roberts Noble Foundation, or short Noble Foundation, for from 1945 to 2017. Our base of operations was roughly, started in 92, a 100-mile radius around Ardmore. So we stretched to Paris, Texas. We stretched to Wichita Falls. We went to Oklahoma City. We went to Dallas. We worked with farmers and ranchers. We conducted research, all these threads that went all the way back to when we started. Our research was fundamental. Our research was applied. That kind of had a national or international footprint. But working with farmers and ranchers, we were really a smaller footprint. In 2017, we split the organization into two pieces. It's a little complicated, but what we were was a private foundation. We were different. We were a private foundation. We gave gifts away to the universities and other public charities, nonprofits. But we also had 400 employees. We operated 14,000 acres worth of working ranches. We were doing a lot of things that looked like a university, but we were in the wrong framework with regard to the tax-exempt world. people looked at us like, why do you have 400 employees if you're only there to give money away? And then you'd have to do the elevator speech if you were quick, that we have 400 employees representing 65 countries or 20 countries and 65 postdocs. And it was too long for people. And so what we did in 2017, there had been a change in the tax law. It created a different type of 501c3 called an agricultural research organization. So what we did is we split the organization, took all the operations, took all the land, took all the people, and we changed the name of the Samuel Roberts Noble Foundation to the Noble Research Institute. Then we did the most complicated thing we could ever do. We set up a new private foundation called the Samuel Roberts Noble Foundation, and the endowment moved over there. So it's two organizations. For people that we meet now, from the Montanas and the Nebraskas and the Colorados, it's not complicated. For all of our old friends that we've known for a very long time, we will forever be known as the Noble Foundation. And that's just part of our history. First and foremost, we're in this for the farmer and the rancher. We want them to be able to make the decisions that they and their families want to make. So it shouldn't be, hopefully it's not a bank or some third party making the decision for them. We've been in this space a long time, so whether conventional or regenerative, we know the double handful of challenges that they have. Right animals on the land, water infrastructure, fence infrastructure, markets. Those things are pretty much dictated. Now, how do you want to approach them as a management question? So the challenges, the problems you're facing, we are planning to deliver you a solution. And it's not to tell you, it's to equip you, because your situation is most likely going to be a little bit unique. It's going to have your own family dynamic. It's going to have your own finances. It's going to have your own goals. It's going to have your own setting. Those we can't manipulate. That's yours. But what tools can I give you? And one of our outside advisors was Tom Field at the University of Nebraska. And he had written this beautiful book chapter on the integrity of ranching. I still read it today. It's wonderful. And one of the things we borrowed from it, with his permission, was our ranch stewardship philosophy. And we were really great about being technical in how we had delivered it. But a ranch is really made up of a bunch of different things. It's the land, it's the livestock, it's the finances, it's the people in the management, and it's their role in community. And so we have developed an educational package that looks at those 5 things. So as a rancher, why should they care? We're thinking about that continuum, and they can plug in where they want to, or they can just get the education that they need, which is hopefully helping them solve a problem, building value in their operation. That's what we're trying to do.
My name is Hugh Aljoe, Director of Ranches, Outreach, and Partnerships with Noble Research Institute. It starts back with that I was running a ranch in Texas for about 10 years, and we were doing a lot of this type of work where it was grazing management, livestock focused. There was an advertisement for a pasture and range specialist here at Noble Research Institute. Did a little research on it, and it just seemed like it was just a great opportunity, so I thought I'd throw my name in the hat and see what would come out. Well, I was successful. It was an opportunity to come here mainly because of my background with grazing management and being able to operate the whole ranch level. And 30 years later, here I am. You know, my background is kind of holistic resource management. You know, I've been focused on that for 30 years. My graduate work was centered around that, and really believed in those principles and practices that when you apply them at the ranch scale. You know, you still got to pay attention to the economics. You got to pay attention to the livestock, but it really is, the land. You know, how do you manage the grazing to perpetuate what you want to do in the long term? So there's a lot of decisions that you've got to make, but they're all integrated. So when we made this transition, all of a sudden that focus is over ranch scale operational success. And it's not only just that, but you'd like to be able to take care of the ranch for the current generation, but how do you build that success for the next generation? You know, and so I do a lot of talks and visiting with different places, different people across the country right now. And one of the things they'll ask, why regenerative ranching? And I said, well, I'll tell you what. He says, I asked 3 questions to producers when they asked me that. First one is, can you measurably tell me that your soils and your ranch land are better than they were 20 years ago or 30? Just give me a time frame. Is your economics, your ranch operations, fiscally in better condition than what they were 20, even 10 years ago? And then the third one is, can you bring people, family member, back into your operation and you want them to be there because it's successful? If you can answer yes to all three of those, you're probably already regenerative ranching, because those are the ones that I know through my experiences that are regenerative ranchers are doing all three. But there are very few do I see that aren't regenerative. Call it holistic, whatever you want to call it, but they are managing the whole. They're the ones that are successful in doing exactly those three things. How do we monitor such that we can say that we are moving in the right direction? And in this little pasture we're standing in, it's kind of part of that. You look at this and you're just beginning to see in the background, we've got a lot of Indian grass and big blue stem here. Well, this has always been a pretty good stand, but if you look down into it right now, it's thicker. It's got more of the desirable grasses, and we're seeing that across all our ranches because of the management that our ranch staff have implemented over the last 4 or 5 years. Oftentimes, we get into our own messaging and we want to, wave our own little flag and say this is what everybody should be doing. But that's got to be something that that individual producer has to, come to that conclusion themselves. So we start asking a series of questions. Why do you want to be regenerative? What's prompted you for this focus? What is it that you want in the long term? And then and through that, then we can begin to build in some of that conversation. How do you apply practices based on true ecological and economic principles in order to build business success? Because everybody wants to improve the land. They'll tell you that, and everybody will say that they want to have a more financially sound ranch operation. But the fact is, do they understand where the problems are that need to be corrected? And you got to look for the big problems if you want to make big improvements. The little things, that's for a later day after you fill the big holes, so we say. We like to call ourselves ranchers communicating with ranchers, because we are. We have a research element, we have the farms and ranches, but we want to try to take that information and build into our education based on our own examples, because we should know more about what we're doing than anybody else. Same said for all operations. You need to know and be able to tell your own story accurately, but it does take a lot of coordinated work. So for each ranch, we have 6 ranch entities. They range from an improved pecan orchard, sheep production, gets a little bit of cattle grazing that runs about 350 acres, all the way up to 5,200 acres of native rangeland. So we have a lot of diversity. We've got rangelands, we've got introduced pastures, we've got a lot of go-back land. So we want to meet the producer where they're at. We like to say that we could probably have a ranch entity that a producer can relate to, at one place or another. But with each of those sites, what we're trying to do is we're trying to track all the information that we can from soils. Fortunately, here at Noble, we have a research group that actually do some intensive soil sampling across all the ranches. So we're monitoring progress over time. That occurs in the spring and in the fall. So it's relatively intense. We also are tracking all our production metrics. We're looking at our grazing information. A lot of our emphasis is centered around grazing management itself, because that's the #1 tool that most of us have access to, because you're going to have grazing animals. And so we're trying to monitor that. In addition, we also want to keep track of all the finances by ranch, by enterprise, and our enterprises are, cow-calf, we've got heifer development, we have stockers, we have purchased cattle coming in, we have sheep, we have goats, so we have retained ownership on both our sheep and goat offspring, so it continues to grow, and in addition to that, we have pecans. So beginning to build that multifaceted enterprise focused set of information that could be applicable, at least for the producers here in this region, that we can take across and apply it in other regions of the country as well. One of the things that, being Noble Research Institute, that we value highly is the ability to integrate our research into our production elements. Because for us to be able to say that we're making some changes, we want to make sure that, one, we're answering the questions that are meaningful to producers, and it requires our research staff to help us design projects, to design the elements of the study that are going to be most meaningful. So it can't just be production. It has to be a combination of research and production. And, and at times, we have to really get down to the point where we have to balance the two. And being Noble, what we really want to do is make sure that we're continuing to measure these things that are critically important and identify what's that next researchable question that the producer is going to have after we attain a certain level of progress.
We have an outside producer panel now that gives us feedback from a broad range. And so one of those individuals is from McKinney, Texas. He has retail outlets, he has a butchery, he also raises his own animals. And he spoke to our board last October. And just one of the reminders, it's good for the board to hear this, it's good for everybody to hear this, that this isn't, regenerative ranching is not an industry yet. It's on the cusp of a movement. And so that's the biggest challenge. And when I hear the story told to the masses, I just came back from a meeting in Washington, D.C., and people not in the sector always ask the question, well, why isn't everybody doing it? Well, why does everybody drive the same vehicle that their father did? You kind of get into, not a habit, but a lifestyle. And until someone shows you that spark on the outside, or one day you wake up and say, I don't know that my business is what it should be, or you stop asking the question, is better possible? And it's not wrong, we all do it, whether it's the way we eat or the way we travel to work every day. It's just a big deal when you're asking a farmer and a rancher to take the risk of changing their operation to something brand new. So what's the response? It's typical of, I would say, the whole livestock industry. Some people have said, I'm intrigued, let's talk. We've had a 20-year relationship. We've had a 30-year relationship. If Noble's making this change, maybe I ought to be thinking about something. It's a way to talk. But for the 264,000 people in the space, and 95% of them just says, I'm going to do today what I did yesterday, it probably has mixed feelings a little bit. We've got to make a little progress that says your neighbor made a transition and you're intrigued by it. I hate the idea that sometimes we got to get on the edge of bankruptcy to finally get your hand up in the air to say, okay, I need to make an adjustment. But when you look at the attrition numbers, and I just checked them out again to make sure I didn't speak out of turn, but you're looking at something like 16,000 beef operations have exited per year since 1980 to 2022. That's an unsustainable loss. And some of it is age. Some of it is the lack of a succession plan. Some of it is the lack of children to go into it. Maybe land costs are too high and we can't figure out how to get young people into the space. Or maybe there's a lot of things working that people are just leaving. If we don't replace them, if we don't start figuring out how to keep you on the land, give you the tools to do that, and also make the money to do all the things you just said, where is this industry? Why is Noble's greatest challenge about change going to be the fact there's no one left on the land, or there's too few? Don't want to be too dramatic, but those are really substantial numbers. More than 50% has exited since 1980. That's not multi-generational. That's now. And we just believe that's too many.
That's a wrap on this episode of Ranchworthy. We want to thank Noble Research Institute for having us out to share their story. If you're interested in learning more about the Institute, their information is in our description. This episode of Ranchworthy is brought to you by the Center of Grazing Lands and Ranch Management. I'm your host, Emma Kaufman, and until then, we'll see you next time.